really like Hillary Clinton, so they better get with it and come up with some policies that are not old instead of talking about Hillary Clinton's age.
Yeah. Michael, I mean, I'm thinking, before we get into any more details about Mitch McConnell, who inevitably gets involved in these kinds of dirtball stories, it seems to me that we've had young people who really like Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
He was sort of a cowboy hero. I meant it in the best way. A pioneer of sort of young new conservatism and all that, tough on the Russians, you know, got a man of action, all that sort of thing.
Right.
They liked him the way that young people like Tony Bennett. They don't all like the young stars. They like some older stars. I wonder if Hillary Clinton isn't a hero to a lot of women. At every age, and girls, if you will.
Sure, I think she absolutely is, and I wrote this. I mean, if you think about it, Chris, there are women, like a 23, 25-year-old woman today, she grew up, the first lady she ever knew in her life was Hillary Clinton, right? So that was like the model in her head of who the first lady was. The first working first lady, the first feminist first lady. So those women now are in this young voting cohort. They're just going to vote for the first, second time. You know, they've been attached to Hillary Clinton for a long, long time. So I think she has a lot of young admirers that Karl Rove doesn't quite understand.
Donna, I was just thinking, if the Democrats are smart, they will wait for this attack to come. Let them come charging with this old person charge, and then just bring out Hillary Clinton speaking to her college graduation class at Wellesley, where she gave this most amazingly, let's say, fresh, militant but yet stark, kind of bold speech for a young woman to make back then when she graduated, and say, you know what, this is who you're voting for here, someone who is at, like your generation, here at her best. And look what she's done since.
Well, that's right. And I mean, the fact is that it isn't just those 23 and 25-year-olds who are coming of age, but it's women who are of my generation, just under Hillary Clinton, who grew up admiring her because she's professional and she's smart and she's talented and she stands on her own. And so I think across the age spectrum, they can bring this attack if they want. It's going nowhere fast.
Well, here's Mitch McConnell. He's used to this line of attack. He's used it during his speech at the CPAC convention this year, apparently referring to Hillary Clinton. He told the crowd this. Well, let's let him do it. Here he is.
Don't tell me Democrats are the party of the future when their presidential ticket for 2016 is shaping up to look like a rerun of the Golden Girls.
What a satisfied smile he gives you with that. The Golden Girls.
Well, except that Betty White is the most popular entertainer across the country, across the ages. And so, again, come with that.
Yeah, I know. I just think the Golden Girls is pretty risky behavior here. Because, first of all, as we all know, you know what old people do? They vote.
Yes, they do.
And guess who lives longer than men? Women.
Right.
And they sit around. They have plenty of time if they're retired. And they talk about this stuff. Do you think anybody's not going to know what they said about Hillary being too old?
Of course. McConnell's crack is exactly what the Republicans do all the time with her and in these kinds of situations. They overplay it. His joke, I'm sure, is really funny to everybody on the right-wing base, but to everybody outside the right-wing base, which is 70% of the country, it's not so funny. And she's going to be the candidate, whoever the Republican candidate is, if she runs and if she gets a nomination, she's going to be the candidate up there, as you were saying at the intro. She's going to be the one defending climate change, defending immigration, defending same-sex marriage, defending all the positions that young people support. And the Republican candidate is going to be the one opposing all or most of them.
My experience is she has a wicked counterpunch, too. Donna, Congresswoman, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And I'm as old as Hillary, a bit older, and I agree with everything you say, obviously. Thanks so much, Donna Edwards of Maryland, and Michael Tomasky. Thanks for joining us.
I must not fall.
These are matters of personal liberty. In Texas, we hold very dear to intrusions against our personal liberty. We fight very hard against that. And we will fight as we begin the session again on Monday.
Welcome back to Harbor. That was Texas State Senator Wendy Davis, the single mother Democrat from Fort Worth, who became a national icon last week thanks to a 10-hour filibuster, all by herself, by the way, blocking an anti-abortion bill in the Texas State Senate. If passed, that bill would have closed nearly every abortion clinic in the state. We figured it would have gone from 40 clinics down to 5. That's a big state, by the way, for just 5 clinics. As you heard, by the way, her saying that clip, round 2 of the battle begins today. Well, Governor Rick Perry has called a special session of the Texas legislature to start today. Perry's message is clear. This bill will pass. While Texas has taken center stage in the battle for women's reproductive rights, it's not the only state where women are fighting their local legislatures. In Ohio, Republican Governor John Kasich signed into law last night, a series of sweeping anti-abortion measures as part of the state's Budget Act. The act contains provisions that force women to undergo ultrasounds. It cuts funding for Planned Parenthood. It limits women's access to public hospitals and prevents rape crisis clinics from counseling victims even about abortion. Well, in Kansas, a bill that passed in April, which declares that life begins at fertilization, is meeting resistance, obviously, in the courts because it disagrees with Roe v. Wade. On Friday, two minor provisions of that law were struck down, including one which required abortion providers to post statements on their websites declaring that the state's declarations about abortions were scientifically accurate. The meat of the bill remains in the books. Anyway, what does the fight in Texas mean for those states and all the states? What does it say about women right now, their rights, their growing power in politics? Wayne Slater is the senior political writer for the Dallas Morning News, and Donna Dukes is a Democratic representative in the Texas State Legislature. Thank you both for joining us. I want to start with our old friend Wayne Slater. What is this division of political power where the men, it seems, are willing to basically kiss off, if you will, women voters, generally, certainly progressive women voters, probably independent women voters, and leaving themselves only with conservative men, perhaps middle-of-the-road men, but probably not middle-of-the-road women? It seems like they're cutting off a very definite minority of the vote in most states.
Well, there's no question about that. You know, Texas is a Republican state, and we can talk about that.
For a while.
But for a while. But you basically look at what's happening here, and what Republicans, largely Republicans and conservative men, are doing is laying the groundwork, reinforcing the narrative that Democrats want to push, and that is there's a war on women. And Republicans are leading that war on women, not just on abortion, but on pay equity and on health care and other issues. And so you see in Texas, you see the message in Ohio, in Kansas, and elsewhere, something that clearly Republicans will want to do. You were just talking about Hillary Clinton. You get Hillary Clinton as the nominee in 2016, and you not only have invigorated Democrats, you invigorate these suburban Republican women who typically have voted for moderate Republicans or would like to do that. Suddenly, they see the war on women. They and young Latina women, especially, a growing constituency. Latinas are more liberal than their parents. And so you see the makings of a new potential constituency in many places in the country, and that's good news for Democrats.
Let me go to Representative Dukes. Representative, I have to ask you about this, and give me an open answer. I don't know what the answer is. Are there many women in this country who would like to criminalize rape? I mean, not criminalize, well, that certainly should be criminalized, criminalize abortion rights. I mean, just say basically there ought to be a law against women having an abortion. You ought to be penalized for having one, not just a doctor, but you. In other words, carry to fruition which way this anti-abortion thing is going. I don't see how they win if they get what they really want, which is to basically outlaw it and criminalize it. I don't see how they win if they get what they want. It'll be like the Chinese curse.
That's true. There are not many women, especially not independent thinking women, who believe that a woman's right to choose should be denied to them. And the Republicans in the state of Texas, and especially Governor Perry, is losing this war on women, and the nation is seeing what they would receive if he ever made a presidential run.
Well, let's look at some other states, and I guess you're going to have to project what's going on down there. First of all, I better get a fact straight here. It's not just that they're moving up the date from 24 months to 20 months in terms of banning late term. I'm going to start with you, Wayne. But it seems like they're basically also saying, unless a clinic replicates the facilities and standards or whatever options, surgical options or whatever, a hospital, it can't exist. So they're basically reducing from 40, I'm told, clinics in the state down to about 5 for a huge state of Texas, which means for most people in Texas, they're going to be pretty awful far from a chance to have an abortion should they choose one.
Yeah, this bill in Texas, however many clinics it ultimately would close, and Democrats say it would be closing all but 5 in the state. But this bill is really aimed at shutting down abortion clinics, at denying abortion rights to those people who want to have an abortion. There's a lot of talk among the Republicans about it's about women's health, and certainly some women, some conservative Republican anti-abortion women believe that. That is a part of it. But this bill goes far beyond the 20 weeks, includes regulations on doctors, on clinics, and on taking the abortion pill that would effectively restrict substantially the right of women to have abortions. And that's why the fight really is so big.
Well, when I think about the cases of Casey and Webster, I don't see how this could possibly pass muster. With the Supreme Court ruling on Roe v. Wade, it's certainly creating an undue burden by basically getting rid of clinics. If you can't get an abortion, your right to an abortion, to me, is unrealistic, and it's being denied. Anyway, thank you, Dallas Morning News reporter Wayne Slater and Texas State Representative Donna Dukes. Up next, Mitch McConnell's latest attempt to undo the Obama presidency. You're watching Hardball, the place for politics.
Chosen of the sun. Unstoppable.
Welcome back to Hardball. It appears Senator Mitch McConnell's obsession with destroying President Obama and Obamacare knows no bounds. Now he'd even take on the NFL. Here's how it happened. 1 week ago, HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius told reporters that pro athletes could help publicize the enrollment period for the Affordable Care Act. In fact, the NFL was, quote, actively and enthusiastically engaged because they see health promotion as one of the things they think is good for them and good for the country. Makes sense, right? Well, that was all Mitch McConnell needed to hear. Last Thursday, he co-wrote a letter to the NFL commissioner registering his extreme displeasure. It reads in part, quote, given the divisiveness and persistent unpopularity of this bill, actually it's a law, Senator, it is difficult to understand why an organization like yours would risk damaging its inclusive and apolitical brand by lending its name to this promotion. Well, notice the wording. McConnell's references to the unpopularity of this bill. It's actually the law of the land now. And by Friday, the NFL caved, listing this headline, NFL balks. By the way, that's a baseball term anyway. At supporting health law after GOP senators sent warning with a quote from the NFL spokesman who said of their involvement, we never made any commitments or discussed any details. Isn't that nice? And today, news that Senator McConnell has a Democratic challenger, Kentucky's 34-year-old Secretary of State Allison Lundgren Grimes. She's apparently a strong candidate. Joining me right now is the Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones Magazine, who's an MSNBC contributor. That's the great David Corn. And, of course, associate editor and columnist for the Hill newspaper, the great A.B. Studd. I throw my greats around coming back here. Look, I think McConnell has really been a louse about some of this stuff. I mean, we have a Constitution. We have a democracy. It's not fragile, but it could be improved in terms of public support. We had an election for president. He immediately starts to carve the guy. Let's make sure this guy doesn't last. Make sure he doesn't become Jackie Robinson, the first black president, but also the great president. Let's screw him a little. Let's undercut him. He said so. He went out to do it. And now he says we got a law of the land, which took years. Teddy Kennedy tried it, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Truman. Finally gets passed. He says that didn't happen. It's getting to be like Middle East politics. You lose an election, and you claim the other side stole it. The other side's always corrupt, and when you get power, you hang them. It is getting like that in this country.
It never stops, and we're going to have a big fight over the health care law over the next few months as the enrollment period begins, and you see states, you know, opting out more, causing the feds to
Why they do that? They want to screw it up.
They want to screw it up. Well,
and they want chaos.
This is the big picture. I mean, chaos is a good word to use. It's like the Joker in the Batman movie. The Republicans' meta message is that government doesn't work. You can't use government to improve the economy.
It's what message? It's meta message?
Meta, M-E-T-A.
I'm learning these things. Yeah. I'm like Hillary.
It's like meta.
I'm a little older.
It's their big message, okay? So anytime they
Do we need those words? Do we need to say those words just to show off to your younger reader? I'm sorry, go ahead.
The older one.
How about post?
But their crusade is to show that government doesn't work. And that means they can say we muck things up, and they don't mind being blamed. And the health care,
because every time government fails, Republicans win.
Yes, and so they're going to keep trying to do this with the health care law again and again and again in the coming months.
Why? Let me ask you this. I have a theory. It may not be the right theory. People watching can make up their minds. I think over time, not all social democracy is good. I mean, I'm not saying the government should do everything. There are certain things it shouldn't definitely be doing, like creating businesses. It's not very good at that, or maybe some other things. But whenever it's tried something along the safety net lines, like Social Security, Medicare, they've become very popular over time. I think the Republican Party is petrified that people will say, you know, it's about time they did this health care thing. And I'm glad we have it, because I don't want 40 million people sitting in the emergency room.
Well, right now, there's a lot of people in this country either unaware of what the law is going to do for them, unaware of the exchanges that are going to be set up for the self-insured, and or just terrified of this. The insured are terrified. Premiums are going up double and triple. Wall Street Journal today. Lots of businesses.
Why are they going up?
Lots, because they're covering the sick. If President Obama and his team do not succeed in bringing the young and healthy into the groups, into these exchanges, we're all going to pay more because we're accepting the sick now into these.
Well, let me get through the sick, not necessarily the poor. Let me get through this.
No, the Medicaid expansion is an entirely other issue. A lot of states are refusing to expand Medicaid. This is right now a largely undefined anxiety that Mitch McConnell is going to be able to prey upon in his race for the Senate to get off of the subject.
So he's going to openly discourage the young and the healthy from joining.
No, he's going to say this is going to be a scary program. It's undefined. It's a sixth of the economy. Government's going to screw it up, and it's going to be really expensive. It's a good issue running against any Democrat. He's also going to talk about the war on coal.
Okay, you're hot. You're doing something I didn't know about. Suppose you have parents that are good parents. They look out for you in your 20s, like our kids, and you say you got to get some health insurance. I don't care. You're riding a motorcycle, whatever you're doing. You're driving a car. I want you to have real health insurance. What's the kids' option given the coming of Obamacare?
The problem is,
young and healthy.
You can stay on your parents until 26. After that, there's no incentive. The penalty annually is $95 or 1% of your income. It's very low.
So the conservatives would like you to pay the $95. That way you're not joining the system.
It's certainly the thinking. The fear of this White House is that they won't be able to sign up enough young people and get the young.
Did Lawrence O'Donnell point out that that's not even enforced at $95? That there's no criminal penalty for that?
I think it's on your tax return. But this is the point here. Mitch McConnell also wants, and the Republicans at large, want to scare people from joining the program.
The healthy people.
Yeah, it's not going to work. You don't bother with this. We're going to repeal it anyway, eventually, one of these days. And, you know, McConnell, oddly enough, is still under fire in Kentucky for not being conservative enough. And, you know, there are conservatives down there who claim that he voted to implement Obamacare by voting for a budget that didn't shut down the government. So there he is now coming out against it to make sure he doesn't get a Tea Party.
So all he's worried about is the hard right beating him in a primary.
More so, I think, than the new candidate from the Democrat side.
I now know. I learned a lot about what the real choices are. The parents have to.
I think he's worried about the general election too.
Yeah. Anyways, he's got a qualified candidate. Good one. And thank you. The one he was afraid of. David Corn, thank you. A.B. Stoddard, thank you.
The sun always rises. An enemy has been slain.
And so, on behalf of the state of California, let me pronounce you married.
We're back, and that was one of a flood of weddings this weekend between same-sex couples following the big Supreme Court decision of last week. And as gay rights supporters crowded the streets of New York and San Francisco for the annual gay pride parades, the U.S. Supreme Court gave them another reason to celebrate when Justice Anthony Kennedy, the decisive vote on the court, rejected a last-ditch effort by opponents of marriage equality to halt the granting of marriage licenses out in California. And the celebrations last week, amid them, the Pennsylvania first and the openly gay member of the legislature there, Brian Sims, he's a state rep, was silenced by some of his conservative colleagues when he tried to speak on the historic nature of the court's landmark rulings. Do you believe that? He couldn't even talk. Well, State Representative Darrell Metcalf, a Republican, was one of the lawmakers who shut down Sims, and here was his reason.
I did not believe that as a member of that body that I should allow someone to make comments such as he was preparing to make that ultimately were just open rebellion against what the Word of God has said, what God has said, and just open rebellion against God's law.
Pretty clearly stated there. Anyway, State Representative Brian Sims joins me now from Harrisburg. He represents Center City, Philadelphia. Ted Brutress, by the way, he's also joining us. He's an attorney for the American Foundation for Equal Rights. He also represented the plaintiffs in that Prop 8 case. Both gentlemen, thank you so much. Representative Sims, tell me what happened. You tried to talk about the historic nature of these court rulings, and you were doing it in what we call in Washington an executive session, not with a big audience or gallery. And even that, among just your colleagues, bothered people.
Yep, you said it best, Chris. Thanks for having me back on. You know, I had an opportunity at the end of the session on Tuesday, after the decisions had come out, to rise and address my colleagues and to talk about the historic nature of the Supreme Court cases. And I'd let the Speaker of the House know ahead of time that I was just going to talk about the cases. I wasn't going to talk about the fact that Pennsylvania lacks all LGBT civil rights. I wasn't going to point any fingers. Just as a civil rights attorney and now as an openly gay legislator, I wanted to reference the historic nature of the cases. And as you know, I got three words in before I was objected to. Now, the procedural rules called unanimous consent, and as it implies, when it's not unanimous, I don't have the consent to speak. And as soon as I started talking, Representative Metcalf and another member of the House raised their hand to silence me.
Let's take a look at Ralph Reed here. I want to, before I bring in Ted, I want to Ralph Reed. This idea that inevitably we're going to have 50 states going with marriage equality is a little premature right now. Catch Ralph Reed, who knows the business on the evangelical conservative side. Here he is on Meet the Press with David Gregory, playing down the impact of that court decision. Let's watch him in action.
I also don't buy into this sort of Whig notion of history that this is sort of an inevitable train and this is where we're going to go. Even after this decision, David, 70% of the American people live in states that define marriage as between a man and a woman. 32 of those states passed referendums with an average margin of 57%, and in a CBS New York Times poll on June 9th, 60% of the American people and a majority of Democrats said they want this resolved at the state level.
Well, let me go to Ted Boutrous on that. By the way, Ralph looked especially tired in that presentation. I don't know what was going on Meet the Press yesterday. Guy looks like he'd been up for a month. But anyway, what's going on here? Do you think the right wing has a chance to stop this movement that seems to be historically unstoppable for equality?
I don't think so, Chris. I think the court's decisions last week, Justice Kennedy's opinion for the court in the Defense of Marriage Act case, laid out the broad principles that discriminating against couples because of their sexual orientation when it comes to marriage, it demeans them, it humiliates them and their children. Those principles that the court established are directly in line with the things the court had said in prior decisions. They're going to lead, I think, to marriage equality in this country, and I think Mr. Reed is wrong. There's been a wave of public support, as you and your audience knows, in support of marriage equality. And the wave just got a whole lot bigger last week with the Supreme Court's decisions. And to be here in California and see people getting married and the joy that is running through this state is just remarkable.
Brian, do the members who oppose you and won't even let you speak up in Harrisburg, even in an executive session, do they know their time's running out? Young people who are joining the election rolls, certainly 18 to 25, up to 35 or 40 now, are clearly pro-equality.
Not only do they know it, Chris, I think that's what this was about. When, let's be clear, marriage equality is going to become the law of the land no matter what. And, I think this is an issue of when losers are losing, they start to lash out. I think that they know that this is happening. They're doing their best to sort of stem this tide, resorting to, to behavior like this and lashing out. But I think that's what you do when you know that you were on the wrong side of history and you're still fighting.
So all they can do is silence you for a couple months, and you'll be back at it again. Because here you are on national television, sort of overcoming their problem, aren't you?
Well,
I think
as you can see,
them.
I don't get silenced all that easily. I come from a generation of people that don't tolerate bullies, that don't put up with bullies. Guys like the chairman have been doing this their whole lives. They've been, this has been happening in the United States for 200 years. But now they're running into people like me. They're running into a generation of people that aren't going to put up with it. They're going to stand up for ourselves, stand up for our rights, stand up for
as Maggie Thatcher would say, come back again and again. Thank you, by the way, State Representative Brian Sims and Ted Boutrous. Congratulations, sir, for being part of that amazing odd couple of Boyce and Olson. Anyway, we'll be right back after this.
The sun always rises. Double kill. Shut down. Killing spree.
Let me finish tonight with this. I think the Republicans are nastier than the Democrats these days. I don't think that was always true. I think in the old days, the big city politics had an awful lot that didn't pass the smell test. But today, I think the Democrats have become a bit prudish about what they say about the other side. Meanwhile, the Republicans are downright ruthless. Mitch McConnell dumps on election results as if he were a politician in some wild third world country where elections can be dismissed as if they never happened, where the loser always claims it was stolen, always calls the other side corrupt, and then hangs the other leader right after he gets power. McConnell acted like Obama didn't win the 2008 election. Well, he said he stole it. Well, he said he didn't win it fairly, and from the start he cried, Geronimo, let's kill this election, this presidency in its crib. Let's make sure this guy doesn't become a hero. Anyway, we got to do this over again. I'm sorry. We have to do this over. I screwed up. I don't want to put that on the record. That's stupid. Fix it. Trial's still going on.
First light approaches.
Let me finish tonight with this. I think the Republicans are nastier than the Democrats these days. I didn't think that was always true. I think in the old days of big city politics, an awful lot went on that wouldn't pass the smell test. But today I think the Democrats have become a bit prudish about what they say about the other side. Meanwhile, the Republicans are downright ruthless. Mitch McConnell dumps on election results as if he were a politician in some wild third world country where elections can be dismissed as if they never happened, where the loser always claims it was stolen, always calls the other side corrupt, and then hangs the other leader right after getting into power himself. McConnell acted like Obama didn't win the 2008 election fairly. Right from the start, he cried, Geronimo, let's kill this presidency in its crib. Let's make sure this guy doesn't become a hero. Well, now he's acting as if Obama isn't the law of the land. Obamacare isn't the law of the land. He's attacking the major sports leagues for helping the country make the transition to the new health care law options, trying to harbor confusion and ideally chaos so he can say that the country doesn't want the coverage tens of millions of people will be getting for the first time. I suppose he preferred just sending everyone back to the ER where they can wait like beggars until the Republicans come up with their own health care plan. Fat chance of that happening. Millions of people waiting in the ER is their health care plan. More and more, the Republican Party has begun to operate like parties in those countries where you never say the other side won, congratulate them, and then move on. No, he plays by the rules of perpetual insurrectionists who deny the validity of elections they didn't win, historic legislative battles they lost. The American people have decided otherwise. Barack Obama has the title President of the United States. Mitch McConnell has the title, too. Not quite so great. Sore loser.
Welcome back to Hardball. A focal point of the George Zimmerman trial so far has been Rachel Jeantel, a friend of Trayvon Martin's who's been described as the prosecution's key witness. She was on the phone with him just before he was killed. Defense attorney Don West spent hours over the course of 2 days trying to discredit Jeantel, and while he did succeed in poking holes in some aspects of her story, such as whether she told an attorney for the Martin family that she heard Trayvon Martin yell, get off during the confrontation, the core of what she said all along has remained consistent, that on the night of his death, Trayvon was being followed by a man who turned out to be George Zimmerman. Still, a lot of the attention on Jeantel has had to do with her demeanor, her diction, and the slang she used. And that has raised some tough questions about the role race and culture will play in how the jury responds. And for more on that, we're still joined by our panel of experts, Seema Iyer, Joseph Haynes Davis, Kendall Coffey, and Dana Swickle. And I'll start with you on that, Seema, because this did sort of create a lot of buzz on social media. There was a lot of conversation about the way Rachel Jeantel sounded. How important is that going to be in this case? Because forgetting all the social media talk, the jury has to evaluate her too.
Race, culture, politics always come into play when picking a jury and when presenting your witnesses. What disturbs me is that there's so much negative attention around this young lady, and we are not giving these jurors enough credit, because the conversation, at least on social media, is this divide, this lack of connection between those jurors and that young lady. Why do we assume that just a bunch of white people can't connect with Rachel Jeantel? Why are we thinking so little? Her demeanor is arguably good for the prosecution, bad for the defense, or vice versa. Her demeanor is her. She was authentic, she was honest, and just because you tell a few lies outside the courtroom, like we do every single day, doesn't mean that you're not being honest inside the courtroom. I don't think any of us in good conscience can say that that young lady was not presenting herself honestly.
But Kendall, at the same time, now she did stick to the core of her story, which was that it was Trayvon Martin who was being followed, that he was not the person who confronted George Zimmerman. That part holds. But is it problematic that the way she comes across could simply cause whatever she said to be rejected by the jury? And was it a mistake, therefore, for the prosecution not to try to get more ethnic balance on that jury during the voir dire?
Well, I think the prosecution got the best jury they could under the circumstances. Jury selection is not just a game of guesswork. It's a game of chance. And the folks come through, you do the best you can. But here's what's different about a murder trial. This is not a jury that's just going to shut off because there's a key witness that's maybe different than most of the folks that they know. I think this jury was working very hard and very attentively to get to the bottom of what she was saying. They know how important this is. And as you noted, the essential elements of her testimony stayed together and rang true.
Your team has destroyed an inhibitor.
Hey, all you assholes, come and listen to us. It's the Keith and the Girl Show.
My goodness. Let me try that. Let me try. Hey, first tell me when I get the pitch. Hey, tell me when. There's got to be a solid G in there somewhere. Hey, right?
You're the G, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to Keith and the Girl. I am Keith Malley.
I'm Chemda. Visit our YouTube channel at keithandthegirl.com/YouTube.
Today we'll talk about my honeymoon. We'll talk about Chemda's adventures I saw on Twitter, I assume, right? Gay Pride Day. This is the weekend.
Whole weekend.
That, you know, yes, you celebrate it during the month, but this is the final one. It's like you go to Mardi Gras. You get stupid the whole time, but then that holy day, that last day.
Yeah.
Oh, there's going to be tits, believe me.
Oh my God, there were so many tits.
See? And I was talking about Mardi Gras.
Oh.
Kind of the same thing.
Pride has a lot of tits and ass. A lot.
That's so funny.
You gotta be prideful of your body, man.
Yeah.
You gotta go with it.
And
God gave you this.
Do straight guys not understand what it really is? They're like, oh, I don't need that. That's going to be lame. Instead of just going and masturbating.
You know what was hilarious is we talked about how gay, it's like 2% of the population is gay.
Supposedly, right.
Right. And so in Manhattan this Sunday, 100% of the population seemed gay.
Right.
It was absolutely unbelievable. And, somebody mentioned, and I know we're getting to your honeymoon also, but somebody mentioned that, because I'm in the LGBT world, quote,
sure.
I know more gay people than your average person. But you know what? Before I was really technically in the world, if you want to,
Right.
before I was trying to attend meetings and, do all that stuff. And before I dated Lauren, I wasn't considered in that world, right? And still, my point was, you got to know some gay people, right? Like, they're just around. And they still were around.
Well,
so,
even looking
because
back,
somebody on the forum said, like, oh, I'm just around gay people, so
Right.
she just thinks more than 2% of the population is gay. But no.
Right. Look back in high school. I was from a very conservative town. Now, I didn't know people were gay. I knew what it meant. I know being called a cocksucker was derogatory. It didn't even necessarily mean you sucked cock.
Right.